Good morning, folks. My name's Sandy. This is Sawing with Sandy. Welcome back to the channel. I'm out here amongst my red pine trees at my sawmill where we're just about to saw that white pine log that you see up there on the sawmill. We're going to tackle some of the problems I often have with white pine, including the pitch. And in just a moment, I'll tell you about how we'll do that. Before we get there, just to answer a question I often get, and that question relates to the red pine trees you see all around me. Yes, this is a real location. Yes, this is not a make-believe set. What we're dealing with here is a red pine plantation where the trees were planted by humans about 35 years ago. This area prior to that would have been completely open. And oftentimes what will happen is to bring back some, I guess, some profitability to the land. You can add red pine trees if the soil permits. This soil in here is quite sandy. The red pine trees in my area do well in the sandy soil. And so these trees were planted and obviously left up to someone like myself to do something with them. What I'm doing is I'm actively following a forest management plan. So I'm harvesting trees, and my end goal is to have a source of trees for lumber making for the rest of my life and, well, probably well into someone else's life. Now, once that ends up reaching an end, what will happen is all the red pine trees would have been harvested, and where the trees were previously harvested, we'll get some native species moving in to take their place. You can already see this happening as I continue to thin. So if you look right where I'm standing, it's an open area. So we're getting sun coming in. And once the sun starts to break through, we get more trees popping up that are not the red pines. So we have some cherry here. Looks like a maple right there. A little bit further in, some of the open areas in there, we've got some spruce popping up. I think I might even have a hemlock or two. That tree right there is a white pine, another one right there. So eventually what will happen as I continue to thin and harvest trees and the canopy opens up, we will get more and more native species naturally growing in here. Now, I'm not planting any of these trees here, the cherries, the maples, the white pine. They come in here from a variety of sources. I can talk about that another day. What we'll also get is the surrounding forest, which is not a red pine plantation. All those trees that are in here, they will slowly try to creep into this area, the red pine plantation, as the trees start to get removed. Eventually, they will repopulate this whole area when the red pines are gone, and this area will not look like a plantation. It'll look like it once did, probably about 100 years ago. Anyways, before we get to sawing, I wanted to talk about one more thing with you. So we're going to be using this here today to do a little bit of sawing. This is what I wanted to talk to you about. This is called spindle lubricant and detergent. Now, I've never used this before, but I got talking to a fellow named Steven. Steven is down in North Carolina, and he's got his sawmill set up, and he's also got a YouTube channel, Sawdust and Sweat NC. So Steven and I got chatting, and he ended up sending me a little sample of this. He said it worked very, very well. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just drip a little bit of this on the blade at the first sign of pitch buildup. As I was saying a moment ago, I would prefer to saw in the winter, which many of you would look around and say, isn't it winter? Yeah, but it's too warm for the log to freeze. I would typically saw this when the log is frozen, and then we wouldn't get the pitch buildup on the blade, but that's not the case here today. So I'm going to try some of that lubricant. Now, Steven had said he typically will take some of the lubricant and he'll mix it in with water in the lubrication tank on the sawmill. But in my case, I don't have water in there because it has been below freezing in previous days. I've got windshield washer fluid in there, so I'm not going to mix this with the windshield washer fluid. I want to see what this stuff does just by itself. So we'll put it directly on the blade as need be. And for those of you who are interested in this stuff, now keep in mind I haven't used it yet. $8.33 US is the cost per US gallon. So obviously it's, by the time you break it down to this size, it's quite a bit cheaper. So we'll give it a try today. And once again, we are using the Ripper 37 blades. You can generally tell they're Ripper 37s. And if you look down here, you can see on this blade here, these are Ripper 37s. They have a dark spot which shows up pretty deep into the tooth. That is quite a bit deeper than a lot of other manufacturers. And so that's one of Ripper 37's claim to fame. Having the extra deep hardening of the tooth allows that tooth to be sharpened a whole lot more before you have to discard it and replace it. And so here's some other blades over here waiting to go. These are Ripper 37s as well. What we're trying to get is a nice clean blade like that, and we're trying to avoid this. Probably a bit difficult to see, but you can see in the center of that blade, that is pitch that is built up on that blade. If you get that, you're in for a world of problems. You'll probably have your blade kick off. At the very least, you'll get wavy lumber. So we're going to avoid that. And so let's get down to work. Here we go. All right, let's tension the blade up, and then we'll get down to work. Now, Woodland Mills, as far as I know, they suggest a hand tightening method. I typically don't do that just because I'm used to the torque wrench, and so I will torque this up using a torque wrench at 25 foot-pounds. When I started sawing with these Woodland Mills way back in like 2017, I think, on an older HM130, I started using a torque wrench, and as you can imagine, old habits die hard. Okay, so that was, and I always double check. Yep, 25, so we're good to go. Just as I'm about to fire things up here, I just wanted to mention what I do in the wintertime to make sure everything functions as it should. I keep good fuel in there, so I keep premium fuel in there, generally speaking. And I often put fuel stabilizer in there. And as for the battery, that's the only other main concern. The battery, I keep it on a trickle charger. I don't have electricity out where I'm at, and so I use a solar panel hooked up to that. The solar panel provides that, that power. Aside from that, I just run it as it is. I think the big thing with these sawmills, make sure you run them. Don't just let them sit around. I find in all my experience with small engines, the longer you let something sit around, the more likely there'll be issues. And I'm not necessarily talking about like mechanical issues, I mean like critters as well. I've got squirrels and mice and everything in between, and they like to get in there into the engine under the air filter cover and do all kinds of damage. So you gotta watch for stuff like that. Best way to avoid it is to run it. One thing I'll mention is the sawmill warms up here in the wintertime. Once it's really cold out and the logs are solid ice, I won't cut with much lubrication at all. I'll actually not use any if I don't need to. The log tends to freeze up solid. When you start cutting, you'll notice the blade stays really, really cool. Once you make the cut, you can look inside the log. You'll see all kinds of little ice crystals. And in that case, I don't use anything. If I do need to use something, the washer fluid will be what I use, but oftentimes I don't need anything at all. This question comes in a lot. People will see me push that all the way that way, and then they'll come over here and they'll say, you got to push your blade guides in. That is as far as the blade guides go with that handle all the way in. That's a beautiful thing right there. That thing was cutting like butter. Check out down here. We're already starting to get just a little bit of pitch buildup. We'll make a few more cuts, see what happens. All right, folks. Well, besides making some beautiful lumber here, we are getting just a little bit of pitch build up, not too much. You see where my finger is? These little clusters of pitch. So the more I cut, the more that'll build up. So what we're going to do, although it's not that bad yet, we're going to put a drop or two of that new solution, that new lubricant rather, on the blade, and we'll see if that cleans it up in another pass or so. All right, here goes. Spindle lubricant and detergent. Now we'll continue to try this out in the future, but we'll just put a little on right now. You know, not much, just a little bit. And we'll give her a go around, see what happens. All right, we're cutting good lumber, that's for sure. When I'm cutting, I'm paying special attention to how flat it is, and this is super flat here. And another thing I'm looking for is chatter. The teeth, it will create a bit of a line. Oh, good catch. The teeth will create a bit of a line when the set is not right. And so I'm just going down it and having a look. There's a lot of knots here as well, but very happy it's cutting nice and flat. No chatter on that. And the chatter will show up as vertical lines here. That's about as good as you're getting with rough lumber, that's for sure. So that's good. Now we are getting some pitch buildup still, and so I probably don't have the quantity of this stuff quite right yet. And so we'll put just a little bit more. As I start the saw up, I'm going nice and slow. And that way I get it all the way around the blade. One thing's for certain though, did you see that? Rubbing my finger over that? Look at that. So this stuff works for sure for cutting pitch, because that takes the pitch off immediately. So it's quite likely that I just need to figure out getting this applied correctly, because that's gonna get rid of that pitch for sure. Folks, well, we got all of our boards cut, with the exception these two side pieces we're going to cut into 2x4s, so we'll end up with 5 2x6s and 2 2x4s. Pretty good haul in my opinion. This stuff definitely cuts the pitch. Now I have to figure out the proper mixture. As I mentioned a moment ago, I want to get it back into the lubrication tank with water, just as Stephen had mentioned. However, because I can't run water right now, and I don't want to overshadow the effects of this with the washer fluid, we're going to just hold off on this for now. So once I get it back into action, into water, then you'll see this pop up again. But thank you, Stephen. I do appreciate that. It certainly is it's gonna help out with the white pine, especially when it's warmer out. So for now, we'll get these pieces off. We'll edge the other two pieces, and we'll call it a day. Now, one thing I wanted to show you, you can really see the pitch building up now. This is why you have to have something like that lubricant I just showed you a minute ago, because if you don't, that'll build up and up and up. Eventually, you'll have some problems with the tension on your blade potentially, and you'll end up with wavy cuts, and you might even throw a blade. And just one more thing here, just in case you're not aware, when you're sawing, you really want to make sure the lumber is supported by the bunks. If you have a look at this piece here, this is more or less the position where I just cut. What can happen is if you get the lumber overhanging too far and not sitting on a bunk, when you're making your cut, especially when you have less material here, you can start to get this piece on the bottom appearing a bit bigger than your intended dimension, because this piece can start to actually want to drift downwards like that. So what I would do in this case, especially over here, because this is overhanging so far, I would actually pull this down, and I would try to get it so at the very least this end is on a bunk and that end is on a bunk. Now sometimes it's impossible to do. This one would be very close, but if it is possible, you will make sure you get consistent lumber dimensions as opposed to having it look like the board's getting thicker at the end. There's only one part of sawing that I don't really like, and that's adjusting these log stops. Well, folks, there's some more lumber into the lumber shed. We ended up with 5 2x6s, 2 2x4s, and that's pretty good considering that log I wasn't going to do much with. The white pine log I had to cut down a while back. I left it just on the side of a trail thinking I would do something with it one day. Well, today was the day. I dragged it out, put it on the sawmill, and now I have something useful. Now, as for the blades cut great once again. Those are those Ripper 37s. Very happy with how fast I can cut and how flat they cut. The lubrication, as you saw, that was brand new for me here today. I think what I got to do is I got to do a bit more investigating, figure out whether I can put that lubrication in with the washer fluid and whether that's going to provide me any additional advantage over what the washer fluid already does. I want to investigate before I do that, just in case that's not advisable. But I do know once I get some more warmer weather, I'll put that lubrication in my water tank, and then we'll see what the results are. But in the meantime, I think that lubricant I will take back to my shop when I'm sharpening saw blades and there's pitch buildup. I like to remove that pitch buildup before I run it through my sharpener. That stuff, because it dissolved that pitch so quickly, will probably go on those blades with the pitch buildup, and that'll save me a bit of time and a bit of effort. So that's where you're going to see that stuff coming up real soon. Aside from that, I'm going to get into the lumber shed before long, finish stockpiling it. I've got projects coming up and I'd prefer to have lumber available. That way I don't have to always cut the lumber before I start building. Sometimes you get that idea and you just want to go get to building and you don't want to cut immediately. So we'll stockpile that shed, and I should probably also straighten up that pile. I took some material out of there. It's looking a little lopsided, but that's going to do it for me here today. Glad you all joined me. If you have any questions at all, please put it down below and do me that big favor. Give this video the like-a-roo. Make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you next time.